Hi, everyone. It's me, Sandy Cruz. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. For many years now, I've been a trusted voice for people in midlife and beyond who want a deeper, more honest conversation about wellness. One that includes the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the esoteric. Most episodes are solo now because I want to bring you thoughtful research, lived experience, and grounded insight without noise or bias. And when I do bring on a guest, it's because their work genuinely adds something meaningful to the conversation. Here, we explore the full spectrum of what it means to be well, how the body functions, how the mind heals, how the spirit expands, and how all of these layers shape life lived with clarity and joy. Thanks for being here. And if this show resonates with you, please follow, rate, review, and share it. It truly helps the message reach more people. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today, I'm going to bust some myths that you hear all about, all these like health influencers talking about how all of a sudden you don't have any gluten sensitivity when you travel to Italy and all these different things that people say about travel. Well, I've dug deep into the research and gone into the science and soul aspect of travel and what it can do and why some people can go to Italy and have no issues whatsoever with the pasta or the bread. So I'm going to bust a few myths, but I am always going to look at it from a perspective of science and soul, stuff that you can't really measure. So stay with me because I think you're going to learn something new. As you know, each week I come to you without bias. I usually come without a guest for that specific reason that I want to do my own research that is objective, that comes from an objective point of view. And I'm not saying anything against all these people who study all these years, but I'm also a researcher and I can do my research and decipher what makes sense and what doesn't. But the most important thing that I tap into is what makes sense for me as a 56-year-old woman who wants to age better, but wants to do it as naturally as I possibly can. That's not to say that I don't do unnatural things sometimes to kind of boost my aging a little bit better along the way. But the most important thing is I come every week, passion over profit. I've been in this space for over 6 years, over 1.4 million downloads. And yeah, so please hit the subscribe button wherever you are, this side. I'm not sure which side it is, but be sure that you are subscribing and share it with one person. And wherever you are listening, if especially if it's Apple or Spotify, if you could leave me a few words, a few kind words, and a rating, that actually helps my podcast go a long way because I don't have these, you know, big sponsors behind what I do. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about travel. I've done a few different types of vacations. I mean, when my kids were little, we would go to Florida. When we got a little bit older, we had the opportunity, my husband and I, to go to Europe. I am a Canadian citizen as well as a Croatian citizen. So, we went to Croatia, we went to the UK, we went to Ireland. It was just a whirlwind, but an amazing vacation. I hope to go back again soon. I've also done a lot of travel, like through the United States. I've done Nashville trips where basically you're just, you know, boozing every day. This was my 40s, guys. And, you know, I will say how much I've changed, and I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm more anti not being present. And I think that there is a place for it when you want to have a glass of wine. I think that there is a scenario where people just drink too much and rely on alcohol more to numb. But we all take different types of trips, adult trips, Vegas trips, Nashville trips, European vacations. And the reason I wanted to record this is because in this spotlight of health and wellness, you hear a lot of different things. You don't know what's truth, what's myth. I mean, I hear all these different things that are supposed quotes from greats like Einstein and, Nikola Tesla and all this stuff. And then I go, did he really say that? And I go and I research it and I'm like, okay, that was not true. So I think it's really important that, there are some voices that are trustworthy, like it's like you have to question it when you hear I'll give you an example. A 35-year-old fashion influencer is telling you to take NAD. And it's not to say that she doesn't have words of wisdom and hasn't done her own research. It's just you have to always tap into what's right for you. So today I am going to talk about why travel can make you feel human again, but I am going to go into the science and the soul. So when I went to Croatia, this was at the end of 2024. I was watching. So I went on, I think we were on five different planes. It was just a whirlwind. It was crazy, but it was beautiful. I was watching Eat, Pray, Love the entire time. Like I would watch bits and parts of it as we were traveling. And I just want to say, Eat, Pray, Love, it didn't become this cultural phenomenon because of the pasta and the prayer beads or anything like that. It landed because it was the first mainstream story based on a true story that said out loud that sometimes your nervous system collapses so hard that the only way to hear yourself again is to leave your life. And I'm pausing there because I'm sure that many of you have felt this way. I have so many conversations, private chats with amazing people who I've never met in person, but we DM each other on Instagram. By the way, that's where I'm most active. It's Sandy K Nutrition everywhere on all social media. So wherever you do social media, you can find me on that handle. But I've had these conversations where people have really had tough experiences in the last few years. And so many people say, God, like, I wish things could be normal again. Ever since the pandemic, things haven't been normal. And I feel that too. I feel personally like I was like, dealing with all the stuff from the pandemic. And then we went on this magical vacation to Europe in 2024. And then after that, it's like all shit hit the fan. I don't know. It felt like 2025 was heavy for a lot of people. And 2026 is starting off that way as well. I don't get into politics here on my platform, but enough people try and have these conversations with me. I usually just kind of put the stop in, like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. But we know that the world is in a little bit of chaos, and a lot of people are feeling it as well. So the collective. And what we can do as humans is contribute as much light to the planet. I know I'm getting a little off topic on this travel stuff, but this is really important stuff because it does connect to bringing in more light. So sometimes you do need to escape. Sometimes you might feel it's really hard to be grounded in this life, in this world. So travel does have a place for sure. And sometimes I think, gosh, I'm not sure how. how much I would have been able to handle my 2025 year had I not been on that beautiful vacation in 2024 to kind of give me a reset before all shit hits the fan. And I know a lot of people out there can resonate with this. So I'm also going to say, I look at a lot and listen to a lot of these amazing voices that are really grounded voices, not these like, little tiny TikToks where everybody's stealing information from each other. I look at certain alignments in the planet. I work with people like Brenda Ferrugia. I talk about her all the time because she's one of those greats that's like this like hidden gem that a lot of people don't even know about. She's amazing. Anyway, 2026 is the year of disclosure. And I'm going to explain what that means before I get into all the stuff about the travel. What it means is everything that's been underground, that's been hidden, the lies, the corruption, all of that is all bubbling up. And the truth comes out in 2026. So we're going to experience a little bit of chaos until things settle again, just as a little FYI. So, Elizabeth Gilbert, the whole eat, pray, love, she wasn't chasing enlightenment. I guess she didn't really know what she was looking for. If you've watched the movie or read the book, she was trying to actually survive her own burnout. And, um, her crying on the bathroom floor moment wasn't melodrama. It was biology. And I don't know if any of you have ever had that moment where you're just like, I can't take it anymore. And I've recorded so many different podcasts to kind of help you get through the difficulties. And a lot of it is the harder work. But it's what happens when your sympathetic nervous system has been redlining for so long that collapse is really your only exit ramp. And so travel didn't technically fix her. It gave her the contrast that she needed to see how unwell she had become. And that's exactly where this episode begins. So you can't, as a human, expect that there's one silver bullet and it's going to fix everything. But sometimes we need to step away from our life and be present in what another life and another body and another surrounding environment feels like. I've talked enough about the sympathetic versus the um, uh, parasympathetic nervous system. And when we live in that sympathetic state for a long time without a break, it can break us. So, the great contrast you don't know how unwell you are until you leave your life. Sometimes that's what happens. And I'm going to actually add in a little caveat. So sometimes I've recorded podcasts about psychedelics. I've done a few. And I personally, I'm not, you know, I would never, none of this is medical advice, by the way. I'm just having a conversation here. But some people do this because there's so much that's clouding their ability to heal that they do psychedelics and then they have these aha moments and they're like, whoa, whoa, this isn't working in my life. This isn't working in my life. This isn't working. And then they completely uproot their life. Well, you don't have to do psychedelics for that. Sometimes you can go to a different place and go, okay, you come back home and you're like, this isn't working in my life. And you can actually have more clarity. So, a lot of people don't realize they're living in that chronic sympathetic activation, which is the fight, flight, perform, produce, respond, keep up. And then they don't realize it until they step into a place that has an entirely different pace. And then they're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be normal. So you land somewhere like Split, that's where I was in 2024, Split, Croatia, and your shoulders just drop without any permission to do so. And your breath naturally deepens. and your jaw unclenches and your mind stops, bracing and racing. I'm going to say that's not even vacation mode. That's your baseline that's finally coming back online. And your body isn't just relaxing, it's actually remembering a natural state that is natural to all humans, but it's like we forget how to live in that state. So, what actually happens in your body, and I talk about this a lot because it's so important, especially as we age, your sympathetic system finally shuts the hell up. Okay. So at home, you're dealing with all these micro stressors, notifications, deadlines, multitasking, noise, comparison, urgency, performance, and your body is always scanning for threat. Your cortisol stays elevated, which cortisol, we need it to get our asses out of bed in the morning, right? We need that hormone. That's the stress hormone. However, when it's staying elevated, your vagus nervous, your vagus nerve actually stays suppressed. Okay. Your digestion, your libido, your creativity, your emotional regulation, all of it takes a hit. So when you travel, especially when you're traveling somewhere slower, that trigger disappears. So that's the difference between going on a drunken, 3-day trip to Nashville, going bar to bar to bar to bar, versus going to Split, Croatia and experiencing what it means to actually be present. So physiologically, your heart rate variability, HRV. See, people always talk about heart rate and, Aura Ring measures HRV, and there's all these different methods. HRV is the time between the beats. And you want you know how you want your heart rate lower, but you want your HRV, your heart rate variability, to be higher because that actually shows a stress resiliency that many of us don't have. Unfortunately for me, mine tends to be low. So when you do go away, typically, and I'm going to do that next time, you guys, remind me. So next time I go, I'm going to make sure I wear an ultra human ring, which I love the best out of all of them. And I actually, I think I have a discount code. Maybe that's one thing I'm going to put in the, and I'm not like, I think it's, I don't remember what it is. Check in my notes. I'm sure I have one, but this is a gadget that I actually really resonate with. And there you go. They're not sponsoring this podcast, but I am affiliated with them and I do love them and I wear it every single day. I don't go without it. So I'm going to use that next time to see if my HRV will increase. But I think you need time for that to happen. So if you're away long enough, your HRV will increase, your cortisol will drop, the amygdala in the brain, it starts to quiet. The prefrontal cortex comes back online, your breath deepens, your muscles release, and your thoughts stop racing. And this is why you suddenly feel like you can think with clarity. Okay. And this is also tied to why some people actually lose weight when they go on vacation, not gain it, even though they might be eating the pasta and all that kind of stuff, because they're actually in a state where they can actually digest their food. There's more to this, though. So, new environments can increase dopamine, but in a very healthy way, not the addictive, scroll induced, overeating, numbing way. Novelty boosts BDNF, which is what increases neuroplasticity in the brain, um, and your brain becomes more flexible, more open, and more creative. And this is why I like ideas will land on vacation like they never land at home. Your brain isn't just more inspired, it's less defended, which is it puts your brain in a very, very positive state. Then there's that sensory recalibration and why places like Split, Croatia feels like therapy. Your senses can be assaulted at home. Overstimulation is your baseline. But when you go somewhere like in Split, the sea regulates your serotonin naturally. And sunlight repairs your circadian rhythm. You hear all these people, and we get all this advice from all these dermatologists. God, stop talking about just the aesthetics of the sun and how it ages you. That drives me crazy because, yeah, we know too much is not good. And yeah, we know the dangers of skin cancer, but the sun is a nutrient, my friends. And when you block the sun, you're blocking out a power source that you can't get from anywhere else. So, of course, if you've got issues with the sun, if you've got skin cancer, blah, 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 I'm not giving you advice, but I'm just telling you that the sun is such an important piece to our wellness. Walking. Okay, walking. Walking. I walked everywhere in Europe. And walking in and of itself will stabilize your blood sugar, which again will have a positive impact on your weight. So, all the things that you experience in places like Split, like the little tiny pebbles on the beach, the colors, the sand all around you, all of it. That's all very grounding. And I'm actually naturally a pretty grounded person, and I look for places. You can look for places anywhere. You don't have to go to Split to ground. But this is really important that we as humans make it a point to ground ourselves every single day. Vacation kind of imparts that on us naturally. Human voices instead of digital noise. So that's another fact. Usually, when you're on vacation, you might be taking pictures, but you're certainly not focused on scrolling, right? You might take pictures, but it's more for like that's something we've always done. We want to capture the moment. So, your sensory system gets different data, and your nervous system interprets it all as safety. And all safety is the prerequisite for absolutely every form of healing. I'm now going to stop and pause because my grandparents grew up. They raised my mom on a farm in Croatia and very old school farming. But every year they would somehow save enough money to go to a place. It was called, I think it was Toplica, and it was natural spring waters. So they too, even though they lived in nature their entire lives on the land, they lived off their land and all of that, they too would escape somewhere. And it would be like a natural good thing for their bones, for their body. And yeah, so even they did that. So let's go into some truth bombs and myths about why you can eat anything when you go abroad. So the bread pasta phenomenon, which is this influencer myth, that's actually half true. Okay. So people swear, and you hear this from nutritionists. By the way, I am a registered holistic nutritionist. I'm sure most of you know that. People swear that they can eat bread in Europe, but not in North America. I'm going to give you the full truth about that. Okay. So the wheat strains are different in Europe. So the European Union, EU, their wheat has different gliadin ratios. Okay. So longer fermentation breaks down the gluten, fewer additives, bleaching agents, and preservatives. Their regulations are different. I'll get to this actually. I'm not going to interrupt myself here. Regulations are different. The EU bans emulsifiers and gums that disrupt the gut lining. North America does not. Your nervous system is different. I mentioned that. This is the big one. Digestion requires parasympathetic dominance. So it's not just about the differences in how Europeans have, their food grown, the additives, the preservatives. Digestion requires the parasympathetic dominance. And at home, you're often eating under control, under cortisol, whereas on vacation, you're eating under oxytocin. And I actually recorded a podcast about this a while ago. I don't know how many weeks ago about nutrition and how we can be our own best diet regulators by just stopping the scroll. No more eating in front of the TV. Well, the TV's not so bad. And I always say that, like we did that even in the 80s. Maybe not. Actually, no, we didn't. Because our TV room was separate from the kitchen and we weren't allowed to eat in the family room. So there goes that. But some people still did, even back then. But the difference is the TV is, first of all, a farther distance away and it's not communicating back. It's not communicating back to you and providing that, pinging constantly in your brain, like your phone and your laptop are, emails, notifications constantly. So it's a very different scenario. However, I have adopted this myself over the last, I'm going to say over a month, and I don't have digestive issues. And I talk about, I think it's something like 70, the digestive issues since the 90s even have increased something like 70% diagnosed with some sort of a digestive issue. Half of it, I'm sure, is resulting in how we live. Back to this whole thing about the wheat and the bread and all of that. The other factor is your lifestyle is different at home. So when you're in Europe, you might go for a walk after a meal, you're chewing, you're not eating in your car, you're not doom scrolling, which I mentioned, while you're swallowing. Your gut isn't confused and it's finally actually in a safe place. The other thing I am going to mention that is relating to this whole bread pasta thing. So there are things that we can do. We can buy organic unbleached flour here. You can buy flour that is imported from Italy. I think it's uh, the 00 flour. You can make your own sourdough with that flour. You can buy pasta that is imported from Italy. So these are things that you can do here in North America. I have a little deli that I go to, and it is a locally ran deli that is Italian owned, and they bring in all kinds of products that are imported from Europe, directly from Europe. So if you find a little hidden gem like that, that's a small local business that supports this type of import, eat that food. Okay. And also, when you're buying pasta, look for, I think it's bronze drawn. It has to do with the slow way in which the pasta is made, which helps with the gluten, which helps with all of that. So, there you go. That's the whole, I can go and travel to Croatia and eat their bread and pasta, but I come home and I can't. There you go. That's the reason. Those are the reasons why. So let's get into this wine myth. And it's not really about the wine. So the wine isn't necessarily healthier in Europe. Your life is healthier in Europe. Okay. And it goes to the same thing about the bread and pasta. You're maybe more hydrated, more relaxed. You're eating real food. You're walking, you're sleeping. You're not drinking to cope, which so many people do. Alcohol metabolism is directly influenced by cortisol. So, lower stress equals lower toxicity. The pleasure lands differently when your body isn't in survival mode. If you're that person who comes home from work, cracks open a bottle of wine, and can't cook dinner without having that full bottle, I'd like you to think about that. That is from a non judgmental point of view. So, the metabolic reset, the hidden benefits of travel. Okay, circadian rhythm repair. The morning light often when you travel hits your eyes, melatonin resets, cortisol normalizes, you sleep deeper, you wake naturally. And this isn't vacation sleep. This is actually human sleep. This is the way humans are meant to sleep. But we don't do that. And we have all kinds of people like sleep coaches and all this stuff that we need now. Well, if you think about how you are on vacation and you intentionally do the things here in real life to try to mimic, just like what I was saying about buying the right kind of pasta, making the right kind of bread, going for walks, doing all those things, then we can somehow emulate a life lived when we're on vacation. But we have to be intentional about it. So, incidental movement, the secret weapon. You're not working out more, you're living in a walkable culture. So, 10K and 20K steps a day. There's hills, there's stairs, there's cobblestones. God, there's a lot of cobblestones in Europe. Maybe swimming, exploring, moving. So neat. It's called non exercise activity thermogenesis. It's the biggest predictor of metabolic health, bigger than a gym. And your body thrives on movement. That is not punishment, my friends. Maybe when you're 30 years old, you can kill it at the gym. You could get on that bike and that aggressive sort of exercise. But when you're aging, slower movement tends to feel better and it hits better. And I'm speaking more about women than men because men have a different physiology than women. But I'm saying this because I'm like, I don't like to sit too much, so I'm sitting here recording this podcast. Often I do micro movements throughout the day as much as I can. Sure, we need to do a little bit of weightlifting. I've talked about Qigong. I love Qigong. I try and do that every morning, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. It's a great energetic reset, stretch for your body, breathing. It's all very good for you. So at this age, we really need to look at, when we're watching all these influencers who are like, you need to hit 10,000, 20,000 steps a day. It's like, I've kind of gotten to that point where it's like, yeah, I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm listening to myself and my own body and what resonates with me. But we know we have to move. Now, I do want to get to this point that travel doesn't necessarily change you, it just removes all of that noise that's in our day to day life. And obviously, you're going to be seeing and sensing a common theme here. So, chronic stress suppresses the prefrontal cortex, and you become reactive versus reflective. And one of the things that I always try and teach is take 10, 15 minutes every day for quiet reflection, whether it's through meditation, through a nature walk, through whatever practices you might have without a phone, without a TV, without a screen. Because when your stress drops, your executive function, it returns. And your personality also returns. Your creativity returns. We all need to have a creative outlet in some way, shape, or form. Your emotional intelligence returns. You hear about people who teach about emotional intelligence, and that's all great, but it's not lasting unless you're doing the foundations. That's facts. You're not a different person when you're on vacation. You're the person you are when you're not being hunted down by your own life. Okay. Emotional thawing, which is the release valve. When your sympathetic system drops, your stored emotional material rises. And this is why people will cry on beaches. And sometimes, clarity will hit when you're in the shower. It's like the only moment you have that's quiet or peaceful. And grief can surface out of nowhere. And then joy feels sharper, and your body finally has the bandwidth to feel again. And I think that often we walk around in this numbed state. So the culture piece. I had a reel. By the time this comes out, the reel will come out. And it is just simply the definition of the word pomalo. Pomalo means little by little. It's kind of that sense of enjoy life. And it's a word in Croatian. And I've seen t-shirts with the word pomalo on it. It's a beautiful word that said it's like a sense like everything will come in its time. It's just such a beautiful word. So it is that reminder that urgency is often manufactured by us, and productivity is not aliveness. Rushing is often just this trauma response, and slowness is actually intelligence. Presence is medicine. And really, that word, it just teaches you that life can be lived at a human pace. Pomalo. So it is really the Croatian word for eat, pray, love. It's just without the Hollywood gloss. And I want everybody who's listening to this podcast to remember that word, pomalo. Little by little, things will come. And I'm sure that many of you have people in your life who are often frantic and frenetic in their energy. And you have to protect yourself. And I'm not saying like that's bad, but often we have to, because I am an absorber, I tend to absorb and feel a lot of people's energy. And so for me, I have to really be cognizant to say, no, I'm putting myself in this protection to say, I'm not going to absorb that person's frenetic, frantic energy. I'm a very grounded person by nature. And sometimes I can be pulled out of my groundedness by others who are close to me. And really, what I want you to do, everyone who's listening to this podcast, you're going to remember the word pomalo. When your world gets frantic, when people around you are frantic, when life is too fast for your nervous system to catch up, think pomalo and think about the meaning of that word. You don't need to travel because many people, you're like, that's great, but I can't afford to go on a vacation like that. So, what you need is these pomalo sessions, slow transitions, slower mornings, do what you can, slower chewing, slow responding, slow walking. Don't be killing it at the gym. Sensory anchors. So you want the sensory stuff, kind of like what you get on vacation. Then you want to have some nervous system hygiene, boundaries. And boundaries, by boundaries, just meaning I'm not going to take that energy of that person who's frantic and frenetic beside me. Breath work, pleasure, presence. So I really just want to say that travel in and of itself doesn't necessarily heal you. Because if you don't do anything in your real world when you come back, you're going to just go back to the state that you were in before. It does provide a reset, and it does provide that remembering who you are. But if you don't adopt the practices, then you're just going to go back to where you were before. So it's going to remind you what regulated feels like, what pleasure feels like, presence feels like, digestion feels like, rest feels like, what being human feels like. And then the real work is learning how to keep that version of you alive when you go back home. So, my friends, if you enjoyed this, please remember to like, engage with my content, follow me here, follow me on all my social media platforms, Sandy K Nutrition, and have a great week. And don't forget to use the word pomalo. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to share it with someone you know might benefit. And always remember, when you rate, review, subscribe, you help to support my content and help me to keep going and bringing these conversations to you each and every week. Join me next week for a new topic, new guest, new exciting conversations to help you live your best life.